Hi, welcome to this series of the Meeting of Minds podcast that's called the HSP Connection with me, Philippa Robinson.
And me, Robbie Lee.
In this series, we're looking at all things HSP from our personal experiences of discovering we are HSPs, working out what we need to thrive as HSPs, and working in our businesses as HSP coaches. This series is something for everyone, as what is good for HSPs is good for everyone. If you want to know more about what it means to be an HSP, I suggest you go back and listen to the first episode in this mini-series, which is episode 90 of the Meeting of Minds podcast, where we explain all about it. Now, on with today's episode. What are we talking about today, Robbie?
Well, today we're talking about the role of HSPs in structures and systems.
Oh,
a juicy topic.
Yeah, we both agreed that we wanted to do this one today, didn't we? And, I am by no means an expert. I don't think you are either. No, you're.
Me neither. No.
Yeah. So, heads up, everyone, we are not experts in structures and systems, but of course we live and work in systems. So we had a little chat before we started recording, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to start this off talking about our experiences and kind of see where we go. It just felt like a really important subject for us to cover, and I think we might end up having a bit of a rant. So be warned, because we can both have a good rant when we want to, and this is very much a subject that does get us a bit ranty. So structures and systems, and gosh, I mean, this is as wide or as narrow as you kind of want to make it, and I'm not really sure how wide or narrow, so I think we'll just give it a go, and if it gets a bit wide we might have to narrow it in a little bit. But I suppose when I think of structures and systems, I don't know about you, but the first place I think of is work. Interestingly, I don't think of family. I don't think of community. I instantly go to work. Do you?
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. That's interesting. Yeah.
That is really interesting. I wonder why. Yeah. Maybe it is work that feels the most structured. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say my experience of work is overly systemized. I mean, there are systems involved. I mean, I used to work in the legal system, so I suppose that's a bit of a daft thing to say, but definitely structures and a workplace being structured, because if nothing else, you've got the hierarchy structure, you've got, even office politics sort of falls into a structure, because it's a way of being in that office, isn't it? And the way we have relationships with people in those offices or factories or other workplaces we might work. At home, I think, interestingly, I think we might have to just look at working from home slightly differently, because you're still in a structure, but it's different, isn't it? And I've not worked from home for an organization, so that's interesting. Right, so should we just talk about our experience of work, because we both worked in corporate before, haven't we? Which is very much a structure. And
it sure is.
Yeah. When I worked in that sphere, in that space, I did not know I was an HSP.
Yeah.
So anything I talk about now is definitely with the benefit of hindsight. Because I didn't understand I was an HSP. I didn't understand I was still absolutely in the depths of my childhood trauma as well. So there was a lot going on for me at work, and I'm going to see if I can try and separate, or at least imagine what my experience might have been like just as an HSP, but that's going to be a bit of a stretch. What about you? What was your experience like? Because like me, you only
found out you're an HSP sort of within the last 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah, more recently. It was, well, it, to be fair, it was something that, like, I heard the term earlier and I'm like, oh yeah, got it. But it wasn't like, it didn't inform my life. Like, it was just like, oh, there's a label for what's wrong with me, but it didn't give me any
Yeah.
tools. It didn't really help me understand things
Yeah. So
until much later, until way more recently. Yeah.
okay.
And so, yeah, I wandered through the workplace feeling like, oh, here's another place I don't belong. Like that, and not because I wasn't highly skilled. I was, and there were places where I would definitely shine. And it was like I could immediately see how things were, when I say things, I mean the systems were harmful to people. And my track of employment was in training and development and then human resources. So I saw a lot of the behind the scenes on how people were treated within within organizations. It wasn't a particular one, it was multiple ones that I've been a part of. And it, something like seeing what frontline workers make, like their salary, for instance. So their exchange for their hard labor, because some of the places I worked, like it was actual physical labor that people did, and other places it was their mental labor. But the discrepancy between what those folks made and then as you go to the top, I mean, I couldn't wrap my head around how that was fair or equal or healthy. Like I just could not. So that one point, and then when you took into account the expectations of, I'm thinking of a workplace from several years ago. It was the expectations of the frontline workers were that they had to do the work no matter what. No matter if their kid had a softball game, then they would have to do overtime if the work wasn't done. Didn't matter, right? No matter if they were sick, you were expected to come in and make it through. Like this was truly the mindset. And I just kept thinking, this is not healthy. This is not okay. So I was constantly railing against those things. And then that was my own lived experience too. I was just like, I'm not healthy in this system. This doesn't feel good to me. And I struggled to find the appropriate ways and places to like voice what I was seeing. It never felt like I was heard. So it was just a constant frustration and just like, I see where things are broken. Like, why aren't we fixing it? Especially when I was officially part of human resources, I was just like, I was so excited at first. I'm like, oh, I get to make the workplace better for people. This is incredible. And that was, I'm not at all trying to dismiss people in the human resources roles, because there are lots of people there who are actively trying to make the workplace better for people. So please, those of you listening, this isn't a blanket statement against, and certainly not against any humans at all. I am talking about the systems that are set up though. And I saw things shift. I saw them shift over the last 20 years to be even, it seems to me, and from my perspective, more and more unhealthy for people, because I would see things like the expectations for a single worker were to constantly be doing more work without a giant increase in pay, just more expectations on their hours, on their own being, more expectations, less resources, less help, equal or less pay, or slightly bumped up pay. And I was just like, this is not healthy. Why aren't we using, like, as we're going into the digital age, there's so many systems that now can automate that, right? We can automate so many systems. Great, that was supposed to free up our time. That was supposed to create expansiveness for us as humans. And what I saw in the workplace was that was not the case. And so I'm like, we're doing something wrong. In my opinion, I'm like, we're doing something wrong here. we're not, I wasn't seeing things that were healthy for the most people. It was healthy for a select few, maybe not even healthy, but some people seem to be benefiting from it, or else we wouldn't keep having these systems. That's my opinion. But it wasn't the majority of the people benefiting from it. And as an HSP, I can't sit with that. It's not okay with me. It's not. I think we should create things that work for everybody. I think it's possible. I think we should.
That is, it's so interesting. I was like wrapped listening to you and really trying to think of remember my experiences. And you know, you're so right about the disparity in, you know, and I worked in law and I was a lawyer, and everyone probably would have had the idea that I earned a lot more money than I did. Don't get me wrong, I was well paid, but I wasn't a partner and I didn't get, you know, the mega bucks. And it very much did feel like the system benefited those at the top who were taking all the massive amounts of money off the top. Yeah. And really everybody else just had to put up or get out, put up and shut up, yes, or get yes. out. And yes. I always felt like I found it really hard. I found the relentless nature of it, and go, and more. And the more you made your target, the more they piled on your target for the year after. It was that game of how can you just about meet it, so you might get a tiny bonus, but they don't absolutely whack it up the next year. And it was just, and then if you didn't meet it, it was your fault. It wasn't because it was an unrealistic target in the first place. It was like, it was no matter my overwhelming memory of being in that environment. And I was a practicing lawyer for 17 years. And then I moved into risk and compliance, so I was in there a bit longer. But, you know, for 17 years, I was a property lawyer. And my overwhelming feeling from all that time is that it was always, whatever I did was not enough. Mm-hmm. Now, not enough is a place that's very easy for me to go to. So that all comes from my childhood trauma. So yes, it's a very easy place for me to go to, but it was always like, have you not done this yet? Well, no, I've been doing this and this, and I can't do like everything at once. And, you know, meeting your target, well, then we'll just up it. So you can, you know, it's almost like they want you constantly trying to claw your way up towards what they've set for you as your goal. And always having it just out of your reach, as though that is something that's going to motivate you. Now, that might motivate some people. I've never been that sort of person. I'm much more motivated by telling I'm doing a good job. And I was doing a good job. I was a really good lawyer. I got given all the really difficult clients because nobody else could cope with them. Oh, give them to Philippa, she'll sort them out. You know, I was doing a really good job, but I never felt like I was. And I always felt a little bit broken by it, or a lot broken by it, at times. And I thought that meant that was something wrong with me. And it's only now that I can see out of it. And that's really the place I went to when you were talking then, Robbie. I went straight to that place and thought, yeah, it wasn't me that was broken. It was the system and the structure that we worked in. And yes, like you said, you know, you so rightly put that, you know, somebody's benefiting from it somewhere, even if it just means they're getting lots of money. Somebody's benefiting from it, but actually they're one of a few. The majority are absolutely not, or I certainly wasn't. Right. Okay. So there's nobody else here that I can ask. And I never asked that question why I worked there. But I'm sure if I went back to find some of my old colleagues, I'm pretty sure I would get very similar. I mean, they might not have felt quite as broken as I did, but you know, and you know, now looking at it and being able to take a step back and realizing that my ability, like yours, of seeing the big picture and seeing that it's not working, the way it's set out just doesn't work. Now that I know that that is a strength of mine, I would have loved to have been able to take that somewhere. But even then, I don't know where I would have taken it.
Yeah.
Because nobody's really interested. Really. Or it didn't feel like they were really interested. And I don't know whether that has changed now. But it feels to me, oh, what rant alert. It feels to me that, like, you know, there's little changes made here in companies and little changes made there, but actually fundamentally it all needs a massive shake-up.
Yes.
And I know that probably sounds really naive of me, and that, you know, oh, it's easy for you to say that, you're not doing it, you're not there running it. No, I'm not. And I think in a way that gives me ability to step back from it. I'm not benefiting from working in a big business because that's not what I do. You know, I'm not working in there. I don't want it to change for me. I want it to change for all the hundreds of millions of people who work in situations like that and who are sick, they're tired, you know, everyone's pretty pissed off, aren't they?
Yes.
I think we've decided we can swear here. So anyway, you know,
absolutely.
You know, and the knock-on effect is then you bring that home and it affects your family and it affects communities, and you know, it's just so yeah, sorry. Got a bit,
please don't be sorry.
No, but it if I think about it too much, it kind of makes my heart hurt.
Yes, same for me.
And
you know, it was part of the struggle being in HR is people would come to me. So I did have an understanding that it wasn't just me having an experience of things not working here. It was so many people that it wasn't working for. And it was hard to be in that role and not be able to affect real change. Like what it felt like is that the people in the roles who did care, they would get some initiatives passed that sure made a little bit of difference. But the way that, and I don't want to discount their efforts, but what it felt like to me is we're inside of a broken system and they're trying to, you know, fix little things inside the system when it's like, well, the whole thing, like you were saying, like, but the whole thing needs to be overhauled. Like, this little thing you're doing, well, while well-intentioned, isn't actually addressing the overarching problem at all. But again, like, I didn't have the language, and I certainly didn't have the power and authority to affect those types of things. I just knew that, like, it wasn't feeling good for me. And I think that's true for a lot of HSPs. It's just like, it doesn't feel right. And I absolutely walked around with, even with what I saw, Philippa, I still walked around with, well, but all these other people are making it work for them. So the fact that I can't means there's something wrong with me. Like, I still walked around with that. Even, I mean, I'm sitting here going, wow, isn't that interesting? Because I was aware of so many people going, they're stressed, angry, exhausted, depressed, sick. Like, these things in droves in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking sometimes just like, why does everything have to be so stressful? Like, I was never involved in any business where it's like, we're actively saving lives here. It's like, where isn't actually an emergency? Like, what are we doing? You know?
Do you know what? I had this thought. You're so right. Like you say, nobody's saving lives. I had this thought the other day, right? I'm afraid I'm going to stray into territory that I know absolutely nothing about. But I had this thought the other day about these jobs that a lot of people do. A lot of us do. A lot of us have done. A lot of us will do in the future. how many of them are actually really necessary? And how many of them are, oh, I'm really going in now. How many of them are a construct, like made not like intentionally? Well, once upon a time there was to be an intention, but they're sort of like, oh, I should have thought about this before I started. But they're like, you know, they're sort of, somebody's, I don't know, somebody has a very long time ago, hundreds of years ago, somebody has a really has a business that makes money, I don't know, selling widgets. That's what everyone always uses. So whatever this amazing widget is, everybody needs this widget in their house, in their home. So somebody makes these widgets, and great, everybody's happy because they're making the widgets, people are buying the widgets, people need the widgets, great. But then, you know, over time, there are more businesses that come together to supply bits for the widgets and to make this and to make that. And okay, you can see they're necessary. But then we have spin-offs that are like, well, the people who make the widgets might need this, or they might need this insurance for some reason, or they might need this other service that we can provide to them, and we might need this, and then that spills down, and then it spills further down, and before you know it, you've got all these businesses doing all this stuff. But if you take all these, if you take a big chunk of those businesses away, is anybody actually really going to miss them? And that's really not a well, I've not vocalized that particularly well, but I did have this thought that really went through my mind the other day: is, are half the things that we are, services and products and stuff, are they actually really necessary?
Yes.
And how, and okay, I totally understand that people have jobs, and obviously if those companies went, those people wouldn't have jobs, and I get that. I do totally understand that. I'm not advocating that, you know, that we lose jobs, but it seems to me that the system is just built on this boom, we've got to have this, we've got to have this, and you've got to, you know, you've got to have all these things, because, you know, if you've not got all these things, you're not a success. So you've got to carry on striving until you've got all these things.
Yes.
And so there's obviously a whole business around all those making and supplying and producing and all those things that we're supposed to have. But also this, like, you know, completely lost my train of thought now. I'm getting so irritated that it's like, but it's just, the system started a long time ago. And I did a talk the other day, and I was talking about how actually until the Industrial Revolution, most companies were just little companies running there were cottage industries. And it was the, you know, the mechanization and the industrialization that came from the Industrial Revolution, that some people, you know, the men at the top who own those companies made lots of money, and then it became important to make more and more money. So, you know, and it's just gone on from there, and we're just mass producing everything. And I just can't help think that the system we are in now is based on what came from the Industrial Revolution in the mid 1700s.
Yes.
And isn't it a time for a rethink?
I mean, I think it is, right? I mean, absolutely. We have so much more technology. We have ways to make things easier on ourselves. And we have so much money, but it sits with a very few people, right? Yes. Like, yes. So it's not that we don't have enough money in the system. It's that it gets absorbed by a few people and just kind of sits there. It's not put back into community. It's not put back to actually help the people that are doing the work. And so it just creates this inequality that doesn't feel good for most of us. It feels terrible. It just
sits really heavy. If I think about it too much, it just sits really heavy. And
I know.
And I kind of think, oh God, you know, what could I possibly do? What could anybody possibly do? And it just seems like this massive insurmountable thing. I mean, it is a problem, really, as far as I'm concerned. And you know, the city I live in, you know, is you know, it's quite a wealthy city, and but we have a lot of homeless people here, people who are living on the streets. Apparently, I don't know, I think people here are quite generous, so I think it's, you know, if you're going to, anyway, people live on the streets, and I regularly see people who are living on the streets, and I just think in this day and age, with the you know, the advanced, you know, society we're supposed to live in, it is an absolute such a sad indictment of where we are, that we have people who don't have a roof over their heads.
I completely agree.
And that just, you know, just, you could say there are so many more things that are you know, are just so wrong with the way it is. And you know, I know it will never, you know, we will never have a major change, but little things are happening. I was listening to a podcast, a lady was saying the other day that she used to be homeless, actually, and she's got, so and she really would like to help homeless people. She knows that it's not in this country, in the UK, it's not coming from the government down. So she said, you know, her sort of mantra is, if it's not going to come from the top down, then you have to go for the bottom up. And she is putting all her efforts into helping, where she lives, local homeless charities and organizations, and they're making a real difference, but they're keeping it local.
Yes.
And I understand that, I can't give you any particular examples, but I understand that that is happening more and more, particularly here in the UK, because a lot of the government money has been cut, because we've had austerity and all that, and we've had loads of years of government cuts. So actually, you know, there are on the ground in the locality efforts being made to deal with the local issues.
Yes.
I mean, that sounds amazing. I mean, it's a crying shame it's not government funded, because it's obviously needed, but, you know, that gives me a bit of hope.
Yes. Yes.
So it's almost, sorry, it's almost like you can't, you know, you can't crack the system at the top. So let's create our own, it feels like, which is like, feels like a bit of a revolution. And, you know, exactly. And I just think that's quite exciting.
I do too.
What's it like in the US?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're talking about, you know, it's absurd to me that in a nation as wealthy as the US, that we have so many people who don't have homes, who are way below the poverty line, where our national minimum wage is well below the poverty line. Like, we haven't raised the minimum wage. So like, people will go and work 3 jobs and are still poor. Like, these aren't lazy people. These are people trying to do what the system is telling them, and still it's not working. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. A nation as wealthy as ours, and we can't afford healthcare. Like it just starts revving me up. And I also agree, like, it can be really easy to go, but these systems are huge, and how the fuck can I make a difference? And it's exactly what you were saying. It's for what I have found for me is it's twofold for me. It's looking at the places like you just talked about. So like, in your community, where can you be of service? Like, where's something that like lights up your heart that you can go be of service? And then I think also truly like doing our own work. So like, what, you know, on ourselves, saying what's true for us, educating people around us. And for me, it means like, I'm not going to go work for another corporation, certainly that I'm not, at the very least, that values don't align with me. Like, and I'm not saying that that's what people need to do. That's not at all what I'm saying. But for me, that was something, it's just like, I can't do it again. Like, I can't. I've tried multiple times. It's just like, it's not the thing that I can do. And so what I can do is build a business that's different. Like, I have been talking about, like, right now it's just me. So, you know, here's me with my highfalutin plans, like, you know, but
I hope you're going to get. I hope you're going to tell yourself what your values are and make sure you stick.
Absolutely, I
well,
stick with my own values. Yes,
good.
But I do. I have a strong. I have clarity around how I feel people should be treated in the workplace. And for years, I've thought about having, building a business, and how much people were paid and how they were treated was always top of line for me, always. And I'm not alone. There are lots of smaller businesses, right, that are growing around this philosophy. There are even businesses that are getting bigger that are talking about, we're actually treating people well. They've created co-ops and things like that where everyone has equal say and equal distribution of wealth, and a seat at the table. So there are different ways to do things. I think we've been in a system for a long time, and so it was touted as the best system, and it was touted in some ways as the only viable system, but it isn't. And so I think honestly that's part of the revolution, is just to start going, oh well, how else could we do things, and where could I put my energy? It's also very true that in the system we're in, we need money to survive. So if you've got to go work a job that you hate in order to feed your kids, you're not alone. Like, there's tons of people that have to do that. And there's no judgment from me on you having to do what you have to do. So that I'm not at all, do what you have to do, for sure. And where you can make the change, make that. Where you can put your energy in ways that fill you, do that. That's how we start to shift things, And also, sorry, one other thing is that what we're seeing more and more of is speaking truth to power. Heard that phrase. So consumers even are saying to businesses, no, like, you have to do better. We're not buying from you until you do X. So there's a lot of power there. We're not powerless, even though it can feel like that sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It can feel like we're powerless. And I do like that that idea of being more mindful where we put our money, where we spend our money. And there are, as you say, there are companies who are trying to do it differently. There's you can get, there's a company certification, I think, that's you can have your company designated as a B Corp.
B Corp,
I think you have those in the States, don't you? I don't think.
Yes, we do. Yes.
We have some of those in the UK, and there's a very stringent process to go through to get registered as a B Corp. And if you come across a B Corp, then you know that they are really trying hard to do right by the planet and by their people.
Yes.
There's a woman here in the UK who I really like. Her name's Mary Portas, and she often talks about people first, then planet, then profit. Yes. Instead of profit always coming first. And the way she believes, and she is living proof of that if you put your people and the planet first, the profit will come, and people will buy from companies who are putting people and planet before the profit. And this takes us into a whole other realm of companies and profit, and all the countries that still use GDP as like this gauge of how well they're doing. And why is there this obsession that GDP has to get bigger and bigger every year? What's wrong with GDP staying the same? Right. Okay, obviously I know nothing about economics or global economics, and I suppose I'm sure it's much more complicated than I should even be beginning to comment on. But actually, maybe it's not. Maybe we're just led to believe that it's really complicated, and those of us who don't know anything shouldn't actually even voice their opinion. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, and I suppose I'm not interested enough to work that out, or I don't have the energy to work that out. But some of the countries now who are looking more at how happy the people in their country are. I mean, how amazing is that? Yes. To judge the success of a country by how happy the people are. Woohoo!
Yes.
I mean, I'm not sure whether the UK or the US would rank on that. Probably not that high, but you know, I mean, so what an indictment that is. You know, yes, we're, you know, on the World Forum, you know, our countries are successful leading countries. Everybody's knackered and fed up. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
And, you know, don't get me started on the patriarchy.
Oh, let's, yeah.
You know, we could really go on. We could probably do a whole episode on our views on the patriarchy.
We could.
But I suppose the name of this episode was the role of HSPs.
Yeah.
And when we talk about HSP, obviously we're talking highly sensitive person. We keep using HSP. We mean highly sensitive person. Highly sensitive, high sensory. We may well use those terms into, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway,
interchangeably.
Thank you very much. Interchangeably. They're all the same thing, because people who, the term highly sensitive person refers to somebody who has high sensory abilities. Willow McIntosh, who we trained with, he talks about high sensory intelligence, you know, because he is very firmly of the belief that highly sensitive people have a real intelligence. And that's kind of where this episode came from, really, the role that HSPs can play, because we have many abilities that can help everybody experience things better. We're really good at big picture thinking and seeing the big picture. So like you say, Robbie, in your work, you could just see that it was so unhealthy for everybody. You could just see that, feel it, you know, it's almost like you could probably taste it, you know, it was so blindingly obvious.
Yes.
And I think that's what's happening now. I think post-pandemic, and we're sort of, I don't know, we're not, you know, we're not going back to the way it was, and this is new, whatever it is, but it seems like quite old as well in the way that it feels. You know, HSPs, I mean, you've said it before, we're like the canaries in the coal mine. You know, when HSPs can sense it's going wrong, it's going to start going wrong for everybody soon. And I think that's what's happening now. It is going wrong for everybody. You know, all during the pandemic, people have been really stressed, worked really hard, had an awful time for the last 2 years. And, you know, to a large extent, things are, you know, we're not under restrictions. We're not having lockdowns and things. So we are free to move as we were free to move. But we're coming on the back of that terrible experience that most people have had, and even everyone's been affected to some degree.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're coming out of that, and people have the strain on us, the strain on relationships. It's just all been a lot, and I can see that cracks are showing all over the place.
Absolutely.
And nobody knows what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Most people,
a lot of people don't know what to do. A lot of companies, a lot of leaders don't seem to, because there is no one answer either.
Right. That's right.
Because if there was an answer, somebody would have come up with it, and you know, it would all be being done by now. But it does need some thought, some caring.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
for people, and a desire to make it better. And I think that HSPs have a real role to play there, because we feel it. We can see the big picture. We just have this innate knowing of things to try that might work. They might not all work, but things to try. And we care.
We care. Absolutely. And the thing that I keep coming back with HSPs in my experience is we care about the whole.
Yes.
Right. So it's not like, oh, okay, well, it's good for this person, screw everybody else and screw the planet. It's just like, no, like okay, it is good for this person, but it's terrible for all this. So that's not the solution then, because the solution is good for all. Like, it's how we're wired. And I think honestly, for me, one of the things we can do is keep speaking of that there are solutions that benefit everyone. Like, because I think we've been, again, swimming in systems that say, whatever, it's got to be one way, and some people benefit and some people don't. And if you're not benefiting, it's because you're not trying hard enough and you're not working hard enough. Like, that's the other part of the bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And
if you
that's not
decide to
true. Hey,
leave,
people, that's a lie.
yes,
Go ahead.
it is a lie. You're right.
Leave,
and if you decide to leave, it's because there's something wrong with you. It's not because of anything that we've done
that's
or
right.
not done.
Well, you're just not. Yeah, you're too weak. You're too something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Too sensitive.
Too sensitive. How many of us have heard that? Yeah. Toughen up. Don't take it so well, but it's about people. We're all people, so it is personal. Like,
Yeah. You're
to
right.
say a business decision, for example, I was at a company and we laid hundreds, plural, of people off at one time. It was one of the worst experiences of my life to have to be part of the system doing that. It almost broke me. But to say it's not personal is very fucking personal to these people who have just, their whole world has just changed, right? Like, that's stupid.
Well, it's just really dismissive, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
It's so not personal. But you're one of the ones that's going. I mean, it's really dismissing the effect that's going to have on that person. And there are other things that could be said. I know it's a terrible situation to be in, and from both sides.
Absolutely,
definitely the one being let go, that's been let
Awful.
go. But one would hope that the person on the other side giving the news actually feels like, like you said, of course it really affected you. Hopefully nobody skips in there and skips back out again, not affected by it. But there are words that can be chosen to validate that other person's experience. And again, that's what HSPs are good at, actually, at making that connection. And and just reading the situation.
Yeah.
Reading the room.
I think one of the things that I kept noticing in business, especially as time went on, is that business kept requiring more and more. And the energy of it was kind of like, it's your duty to give so much here, right? Like, you're not a good employee unless you, it would never be worded this way, but this is literally how it felt. Unless you're killing yourself, unless you're putting in all these extra hours unpaid, unless you forgo your vacation, or if you say your vacation, but you're really working through it, and no sick day, like work when you're sick, like just expecting so much. And like you said, like every year the goal's getting bigger and bigger and more, and just never feeling like, oh, I did it, smashed it, we did it, woohoo, yay us. There was never that moment, at least for me. And or if it was like a blip and it's like, okay, on to the next thing. I lost my train of thought. I'll get it back in a second. Business was constantly like feeding this expectation of, in order to be rewarded here, in order to be seen as a good employee, you have to do all of this. But then and I'll give you this one example. This, in a nutshell, for me, is an imbalance of business. You are very much expected to give. Most people in America don't have work contracts. It's so we can be fired at any time. We can quit a job at any time. Yeah, there's no stability for most workers in the United States.
That. Wow.
Yes. So, and that's something that employers hold over workers' heads all the time. Now we have laws in place to prevent against discrimination and stuff, but that's a whole separate thing. So, It is very much the expectation that you give at least 2 weeks notice when you quit. Like if you don't do that, you're seen as a terrible employee. You won't get a recommendation when you're going to your next place. You know, you won't be seen as rehireable at that company you're leaving. On the other hand, when an employer terminates your contract, you're walked out of the building right then.
And that's
So
it. The pay ends
that's it.
that day.
So it depends. Like some companies will offer severance, and so then yes, that's different. But some, no, that's it. That's the end of your health insurance, because in the United States, health insurance is tied to work, which is another way that we get stuck in a job. I've had, you know, so many people just like, well, I can't leave my health insurance. So these are the types of systems that, like, they're imbalanced and they're not working for people. But as HSPs, if we can come in and see again, like where it's imbalanced and how we can start making those changes. Like there are companies where people, employees, when asked like how do they want to help each other, they'll, for example, pool their sick time together so that if someone had a big family emergency, they could pull from the pool for people. Like something just like how generous, right? How kind, like, but that's again like working for everybody, right? Instead of, because again, in the US, not in every company, there are starting to be changes, but in many companies, it's like you get a week or 2 weeks off for vacation and sick time a year. It's
That,
like,
I have to
okay,
say, is completely,
right?
I mean, that is unbelievable to me, because
It's ridiculous.
we get much more than that.
Yeah. So I don't want this podcast to just be about, this episode to just be about, well, all the shit we see is wrong. And honestly, Philippa, we haven't even talked school systems. We haven't talked health system, right? We've literally just talked about the one system.
I know, I was thinking that, you know, we need HSP teachers, we need HSP
Yes.
healthcare
Oh my
workers, we
gosh,
need
please.
HSPs everywhere. I was thinking the
Yes.
same thing, that
Yeah.
we wondered whether we'd have enough to talk about, and we've ranted for quite a while just about like corporate
Business.
workplaces.
Corporate. Yeah. But there, it like, I think I really do want, I want to go back to what you said about like if we can't do top down, right? Which most of us are not empowered to go like make big changes at the top of any of these systems and structures. But there are bottom up movements that become really impactful. And you can do that in your community, you can do it in your workplace, you can like find those places that again fire you up, that you have juice around, and let your voice be heard. I think if I can say anything to HSPs, we need to stop being silent and stop internalizing, like when we see a problem, oh, I don't fit because there must be something wrong with me. No, you're seeing the problem in the system. Give voice to it, because you're not the only one that's having a problem with it. You're not. Give voice. Yeah.
Well said. I was thinking, I was absolutely thinking the same thing, that would be a good place maybe to bring us to an end. That you know, I would hope that we might have empowered some HSPs to realize that actually by speaking up, they are doing themselves and lots of other people a service.
Yes.
And you know, I hope we might encourage anybody who's in that position to know that what they're feeling, what they're thinking about it, what they're seeing that nobody else seems to see is a real advantage, is a really great thing. So don't keep it to yourself.
Yes, please speak up.
Yeah, because I wish I know that if I'd known then what I know now, I would have done some things differently. I'm not saying they would have had any results, but I would definitely have done things differently. And I wouldn't have stayed some places quite so long.
Yes, I think that's another piece too, right? If you are able to find a different work environment, look for them, because there are different kinds out there for sure.
Yeah.
And you know, you may not, by speaking up, you may not create big sweeping changes immediately, but I promise you, you will have helped somebody. You have planted seeds somewhere else. And at the very least, you're giving voice to the knowing inside of you. And you have a knowing for a reason, right? So speak it out, because each of these little, it's like drops in a bucket. Like each of these things that we do, at first it's just one drop in a big bucket. Okay, but eventually, right, it starts adding up. And eventually it's like, oh, I heard so-and-so talk about that too. Oh, and I'm hearing it over here. And we start hearing it in different places. And eventually, like, all of our buckets, we're going to find each other. And then it's a pool now. And then the pools find each other. And now it's a lake. And the lake, it just,
that would be amazing.
It makes the difference. It makes the difference.
Yeah. And also, what's just come to my mind is that, you know, if anyone can be brave enough to sort of actually take the leap and say what they are feeling, you know, they might not get an instant response. They might not, you know, nobody might agree with us. You know, I'm just imagining, you know, sitting around the big table at a meeting and nobody's agreeing with you and nobody's saying anything and everyone's just looking down. You think, well, that was a waste of time. I bet you there are people in that meeting who are thinking, either you've made them think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Or there are people thinking, oh, thank God somebody said that. They might not openly be able to say that in the meeting. They might not feel quite as brave as you in that moment, but they may well come and talk to you afterwards. Or it might just, you know, percolate for a little bit. But you will be making a difference. Absolutely, you will be making a difference.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I think Robbie, we might have to stop here.
Yeah.
What a fascinating conversation. I loved it.
Me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
I feel like we could probably do another one somewhere down the line about other areas, but you know, as a start, I think that was marvelous. Thank you very much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to record these with you.
Oh, I feel the same way. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you for listening, everybody, watching, if anyone's watching the video, and you can find out where to find me and Robbie in the show notes. If you want to know more, you're Robbie Lee, leigh.com, aren't you, Robbie?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and followers of me will hopefully know, but you'll find me at safeandsupported.co.uk. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We'd also really love to hear from you if you've got any thoughts about what we've said, preferably kind ones, but I'll take, you know, if you want to say that I shouldn't be talking about things that I don't know anything about, then that's fine. You know, I don't have to agree with you, but, you know, any comments at all about what we've said in this episode or any previous episodes, we would really love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us individually via our websites, or you can email meetingofmindspodcast@gmail.com. So that's it for this week. And we will be back next week with an as yet unchosen subject, but equally, you know, another subject we will really enjoy talking about. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Bye, Robbie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeting of Minds podcast. You can find this podcast in all the usual places. Please tell your friends. Please subscribe. And if you have a moment, I'd be really grateful if you could rate and review, as it helps other people find us and helps me spread the messages of empowerment and positivity that I'm really passionate about. If you want to find out more about me, you can visit my website, www.safeandsupported.co.uk. Until next time, bye.